Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Happy Saturday. Hi, Laura. Thank you
Hello. Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so honored.
So are we.
It's a big crowd today. I'm so happy.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah. And if everybody would like to open their chat box, that would be great. We have a lot of typers in this group. And I want to make sure that,
Rebecca, do you mind doing it for me? For some reason, I'm being technically challenged. Let me see.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, perfect.
My
So
Gmail is being annoying.
no worries. I have it up.
Okay, cool.
So, wow.
Oh, wow, 14.
I know. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on a Saturday morning. Oh, hold on, my screen share was being funny.
Okay.
Feel free to type in the chat. Zoom share.
I had a quick welcome message put into his iPad that he wanted to play real quick. Just we can check and see if you can hear it. You can push the green.
Hello and good morning to the West Coasters and good afternoon to the East Coast. Thank you everyone for logging in today. It is an honor and a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Morelli. Thank you, Autism Tree, Rebecca, Dana, Danielle, and Dr. Levy for supporting my book club dream. I'm Lana, co-founder of the book club. I'm 19, a high school senior. I've all earned a scholar. You can find more info. Let me work on this. Morelli.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Otto. I'm just really honored, and thank you all so much for reading The Last Masterpiece. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it off to Danielle Levy, who's also our program and co-host with Otto. And I mean, Otto, you're so wonderful and amazing for reaching out to Laura on behalf of Autism Tree and making this happen. So thank you. And Danielle, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I think it reloaded for a second, but I'm here now.
Okay, great. So I can let's jump into the amazing slideshow that Danielle made for the book club this morning, and then we'll go straight into Q&A and ask Laura some questions.
Cool. So thank you very much for joining us, Laura. We really appreciate it. Otto has this talent for having authors join us, and it's made the book club kind of famous, I think, which is cool. So basically about our author, she earned her Ph.D. in art history from Yale. She combined her intellectual passions at Yale with a Mellon doctoral fellowship in art history and a Bass fellowship for writing in the humanities. She's a USA Today and Publishers Weekly best-selling historical novelist, with book club picks at Target, Costco, Veranda Magazine, and Hudson News. She's taught college students everywhere, both US and Italy. She's done TED Ed, and she is teaching online. She has contributed to National Geographic, Italy Magazine, Departures, and other medias. She's won numerous awards such as IPPY, Eric Hoffer Award, Da Vinci Eye Prize, National Indie Excellence, the Benjamin Franklin Award, Writer's Digest, so on and so forth. And then she is starred in reviews and editors' picks in Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, and Historical Novels Review. She's lived and worked in 5 countries, which sounds amazing. And then she has been involved with Authentic Arts Shopping Guidebook series and currently lives on the coast of Georgia with her husband, 2 sons, 2 daughters, and her large family, and it sounds like is a chef as well. So I also like flat-faced dogs. which she mentioned on her bio. So this is basically a summary of the book. Our book club welcomes people who haven't quite read it yet, or maybe are halfway through, because we learn things as well that are related to it. So it can be kind of a teaching environment. And you'll see in a little bit that we'll learn a lot about Italy and maybe the World War and some famous sites. But basically, the general summary is that in the summer of 1943, Eva Brunner is taking photographs of a Nazi looted art hidden inside the salt mines of the Austrian hinterland. Across the ocean in Connecticut, Josephine Evans is working as a humble typist at the Yale Art Gallery. When both women are called to Italy to contribute to the war effort, neither imagines she will hold the fate of some of the world's greatest masterpieces torn from the Uffizi galleries and other Florentine art collections in her hands. But as Italy turns from ally to enemy and Hitler's plan to destroy irreplaceable monuments and works of art becomes frighteningly clear, each woman's race against the clock and against one another might demand more than they were prepared to give. The last masterpiece takes readers on a heart-pumping adventure up the Italian peninsula, where nothing is as it seems, and some of the greatest works of art and human achievement are at stake. Who might steal and who might save a work of art, and at what cost? So yeah, then I wanted to just hand it over to our author, and I put some things that I
We lost her. Oh, wow. I know. Well, at first I want to read.
out.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, sorry. It keeps reloading. So, but if Laura could tell us about, I just put some things that I found from her bio and also that were related to the book, and we could have a conversation about art and history and all of that fun stuff. So,
Perfect. So the first one is Murano glass.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite subjects. So I'm happy to tell you a little story about my first trip to Venice. I don't know if any of you have been there and how long ago, but it was when I was there for the first time. I was a preteen and quite naive. And I had this idea that I was supposed to come home from Italy or from Venice, especially with Murano glass. And so I found myself with my friend and her family in the Piazza San Marco, which is the main square in front of the Basilica in Venice. And at that time, they used to have these kind of fast talking hawkers that would stand around in the square and lure people onto boats to take a trip over to Murano. Murano, as you may know, is the famous glass blowing island right off the coast of Venice. Centuries ago, it was completely closed off from the rest of the world. The Venetian Republic wanted to keep its famous glass blowing secrets a secret from the rest of the world. And so they had the island closed off. And over the centuries, this tradition of glass blowing became very important. And these beautiful works were highly coveted all around the world. So my friend and I and her family found ourselves whisked away across the Venetian lagoon to Murano, where we then stood in line behind dozens of international tourists to pay an exorbitant price for a little glass fish, which I still have today. But it was kind of a bewildering experience of falling prey to a tourist trap. And so later in my life, when I studied art history, I studied, of course, all of these great artists of the past. And especially, when you open an art history textbook, you find lots of things that have to do with Italy and Italian history, not only the ancient Etruscans and Romans, and then you go to the Renaissance and you have Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. And I thought, well, where is Murano glass? Because it was also an important tradition. And so as I finished my studies in art history, I sort of became obsessed with finding these artisans who were carrying on these centuries-old traditions that were very important, but certainly missing from your mainstream art history textbooks. And it led me down this long and crazy adventure of finding artisans who were carrying the torch of tradition of centuries past into today. So still there are many artisans across Italy who are creating ceramics and woodwork and blown glass like that from Murano, and gondolas. And it was the story of one of the gondola makers that actually inspired my first novel. And so this, work of Murano glass was kind of a thread that continued through the years and led me ultimately into fiction as well. So a little bit of a long story, but Murano glass is really a fascinating topic. It's a whole can of worms. If you want to learn about glass techniques, they've got all kinds of different things, like the vase that you're showing on the screen now is a particular technique called mille fiori, or thousand flowers. And I think you can appreciate why it's called that, because it looks like thousands of flowers across the surface. I hope that gives you a little taste of what it is.
That's amazing. I'm looking at the chat and I just want to read something for to give voice to the people in the chat. Well, first Morelli said, I love all things Italy and I'm a big Laura Morelli fan.
Thank you.
Bella said it's magical. And that's in response to Otto saying, I love museums and feel blessed there are people who found it important to save these works. And William says, Italy is on my bucket list for history and culture. And Zach asked, did that trip inspire your studies in art history?
Yes, definitely it did. I was really fortunate as a young person to travel a lot. And, I grew up in a very remote corner of Georgia. And so, it's now looking back so long afterward, it's kind of interesting to me to realize that, as this young preteen in rural Georgia, I already had this idea of Murano glass. And I think that's a testament to how world-class some of these items are. If you think about things like Parmigiano Reggiano cheese or balsamic vinegar, or these other things that come from Italy that we just know about, even if we've never been there. And certainly when I started to see that there were these amazing historic traditions like Murano glass, or, things like Gothic cathedrals that we don't have in the United States, then that was kind of the spark of an inspiration for me to go further into the study of art history and to pursue it. I actually started when I was in college. I was a Romance languages and literature major, and I had always loved to write creatively. I wrote creatively when I was a child. I was just a huge reader from when I was this 3-4 years old. I loved books. I was obsessed with books. So that was already there. But once I was able to travel and then study further, it was really an inspiration for me to keep going with the study of art history. I think it's one of the most fascinating topics in the world. And, I've been studying it now for about 40 years. So, and I still am amazed at all of the discoveries. There's so much to learn that, you could never learn it all. So I just think it's one of the most interesting topics in the world.
I love it. Next, Danielle, you want to say anything about this?
Well, I was hoping Laura would tell us about it. But I was going to say I was an English major in college, and I feel the same where right now I'm studying medicine, but the guilty pleasure is definitely the books and art and just learning about all of those things. And I feel like that's such a fun world to indulge yourself in. And when I was reading this and also just Googling different things that were related to the book, there was just such an escapism, and it, I feel like, is so much fun to learn about the things in history that have been made and how beautiful art has been. So
Well, thank you. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I really have always loved the escapism of a great novel. I mean, I think that's the magic of reading fiction, is that you're just looking at, you know, black dots on a page, and yet you're transported in your mind to some completely different place. And you know, in writing fiction, that is my highest aim, is to try to take a reader somewhere else in their mind, you know, somewhere really where they could see or smell or touch something different, and imagine themselves walking the streets of a different place. So books are amazing for having the power to do that, to help us do that. So you have the beautiful grounds of the Palace of Caserta on the screen now. It's such a fabulous place. Say that again.
That's Jack. Do you have something to say, Jack? No, we're good. You can keep going.
So many of you are probably familiar with the Palace of Versailles outside of Paris. It's an enormous Baroque palace, and either you've been there or you've seen pictures of it, and you probably can conjure an image in your mind. But the Palace of Caserta is another one of these absolutely enormous Baroque palaces. It's maybe a little lesser known than Versailles. It lies not too far from Naples and Mount Vesuvius, and it was the palace of the kings of Naples during the Baroque period. But during World War II, it was actually the Allied headquarters. Once the Allies were able to take control of the southern half of the Italian peninsula, they used the Palace of Caserta as a kind of headquarters. I mean, it had hundreds of rooms and all kinds of facilities and things that they could use, and they used it as a kind of central place where they could, you know, go out onto these different expeditions, and they could organize all of their activities. And it plays a role in The Last Masterpiece as well, because for a certain period of time, there were members of the Women's Army Corps who were stationed at Caserta. And the Women's Army Corps was a very interesting organization. You may know that women have always played a role in the U.S. military. And certainly if we think about times up through, let's say, World War I, we tend to think of nurses primarily. But even nurses were considered kind of auxiliary to the main activities of the US military. But starting in World War II, they created this organization called the Women's Army Corps. Prior to that, it was called the WAC, but it was the WAAC. That was the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Well, in 1942, they dropped the word auxiliary, and these WACs, the WACs, were fully fledged members of the US Army. They were not considered auxiliary. They were brought in to work alongside the men. They traveled right behind the front lines, and their job was to take on all sorts of jobs that would free up more soldiers to go to the front lines. And so they were doing things like they were telephone operators, they were paper filers, they were stenographers like Josie in The Last Masterpiece. They were doing things like organizing logistics, and they made an incredible contribution during World War II. It was an experiment on the part of the US Army. Many of these women, unfortunately, faced quite a lot of criticism as they first began signing up and volunteering for this role. But they ended up playing such an important role, making really important contributions. General Douglas MacArthur claimed that they complained less than some of his other soldiers, that they worked harder. He called them my best soldiers. And so I thought it was a really fascinating group of women. And that's what inspired me to make Josie Evans a WAC in this story. And so when she arrives on Italian soil, she is posted to the Palace of Caserta, where these women begin their adventure up the Italian peninsula.
It's amazing. Otto said in the chat, yes, women contributed too.
So I got a chance to go as part of the research for this book. I got a chance to spend some time in the Women's Army Museum archives. There's a Women's Army Museum in Fort Lee, Virginia, and they have some of the letters and diaries and photographs of the women who served in the Women's Army Corps. And that was so interesting to read their diaries and their letters home. And what was interesting about it was I really thought that I was going to hear, these really epic stories of brave things that they did, because they did do a lot of brave things. But instead, most of their writing had to do with kind of the daily difficulties of living, which was very interesting. It gave me lots of details for the novel. So, things like hanging laundry, or the lavatories, or the food that they ate, or the mosquitoes, or and the mosquito nets that they had to put up. Lots of little details of daily life that were very interesting, and I thought helpful in creating the character of Josie and and imagining what her environment was like during that time.
Amazing.
It reminded me as well. One of my favorite books is A Farewell to Arms. And so I'm a big Hemingway fan, so reading this just reminded me of his experience in the World War. I think he was involved with an ambulance, and I've always been drawn to that era of writing, so it was fun to read about more details associated with it. For example, I actually had never heard of the Palace of Caserta.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. Not many people know it as well, as Versailles or others. I think it might just be because of the location. It's, inland from Naples. It's not super easy to get to. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but anyone who goes there and sees it in person is just blown away by the scale of it. It's just absolutely enormous. And just, as most important Baroque buildings were, it's just this extremely ornate building. Every surface on the inside is covered with gilding and mirrors and marble, and it's just kind of a feast for the senses when you get to visit it.
I love it. Bella said, I'm so eager to see the palace in person. And she's like, man, I love that women were acknowledged in your book. And Otto also said, I think Matt Damon should play Captain Thomas for the movie.
Oh, that would be so cool. I would love it. I love it when people suggest actors for me, because that really does give you a picture in your mind.
Okay, great. I think we'll go on to the next one. Uffizi Galleries.
So the Uffizi Galleries, and that's such a cool picture that you found, by the way. That kind of lens makes it look like it's all curved instead of straight. That's really cool. So the Uffizi Galleries is right in the historic center of Florence, right along the Arno River. You probably know that it's one of the most important museum collections in the world, and it holds all kinds of works of art that you would recognize immediately. Several works by Michelangelo. I'm sure you could probably conjure in your mind Botticelli's Birth of Venus, Botticelli's Primavera, lots of other works by famous Italian and other artists as well. So On the eve of World War II, the museums across Europe were faced with this incredible challenge of what to do with their collections that might be at risk if war was coming their way. And so the Louvre and other big museums across Europe were busy making plans around 1938-39 to figure out what they were going to do with their collection. They weren't going to just leave everything exhibited on the walls and in their hallways of their museums, because they might be at risk of being damaged or destroyed or stolen. And so they began to pack things up. Now at the Uffizi, this was, there were several waves of packing things up. They started with things that were a little bit easier to transport, like paintings or smaller objects. But certainly Florence is such an incredibly rich city. I mean, it is the cradle of the Renaissance. It has really iconic works like Michelangelo's David, Brunelleschi's famous dome on its cathedral. Who would be responsible for making sure that all of these things were safe? Certain things weren't portable at all, like the cathedral dome or Michelangelo's David. So, but the conservators at the Uffizi and the local art superintendents had this unenviable task of figuring out how they were going to package up their collection, load it into trucks, and then figure out where in the world to take these works where they would be safe. Well, over the course of just a very short period of time, they located a handful of hiding places in the countryside. They felt like it was important not to store everything in one location, because that might make it more risky for damage or destruction, whether on purpose or by accident. So they decided to scatter the collection into different locations. They located some privately owned and state-owned villas on the outskirts of Florence. They also found monasteries, privately owned homes, wine cellars, all kinds of interesting hiding spots, and they dispersed the collections of the Uffizi Galleries, the Pitti Palace, the Museum of San Marco, lots of other collections across Florence that were coordinated, and these works were taken into hiding places. So this building, the Uffizi Galleries, stood empty for several years over the course of World War II. It was such an incredibly complex operation to try to empty this museum and figure out how to transport things safely. One of the most amazing experiences I had researching this part of the story was I spent a while inside the archives of the Uffizi Galleries, and they have cartons of the original documents that were the either typed or handwritten inventories of what was in the museum and where they went. And so remember, we're in an age before cell phones, before computers. And so all of these things, as I said, were either typed or handwritten, sometimes with a carbon copy. But what happened was, as the hostilities escalated, and the Germans were already in Italy because they were allied with the Italians at the beginning of the war, as things escalated and the Germans started figuring out where things were, they had to move works of art, and they had to sometimes move them several times. And so in these documents in the Uffizi archives, you see the original either handwritten or typed inventory, and then you see all of this red ink, things are scratched out. Started in this location, on this date, the painting was moved to another location, and then to the next and the next. It was really amazing. And you think about the cost of making a mistake, a clerical error. If you crossed out the wrong thing or neglected to say where something was, a priceless work of art could go missing. And remember, they would have had, at a certain point, all of the telephone lines were cut. They had no way to communicate with each other between the hiding places. It wouldn't have been like today, where you could just pick up your cell phone or FaceTime someone in another hiding spot. When the roads were mined and the telephone lines were cut, they had no way to reach each other. And so these works of art were in the hands of caretakers in these remote rural locations until the end of the war, when everything could be checked on and brought back to the city eventually. So I thought a lot about this. I read a lot of accounts of the people who were responsible for moving these works of art, for hiding them, and then ultimately the accounts of the monuments men who helped bring things back in one piece. And it was really an incredible operation. Just so much work, so much thought, so much care went into transporting these works of art. There were some 50 hiding places across Italy during World War II. 39 of them were in Tuscany, which gives you a sense of the richness, the artistic heritage of Tuscany. It really is one of the most rich regions of Italy in terms of well-known and important works of art history. And so they had a huge task. There are hundreds of churches just in Florence themselves in itself, and each church contains many artistic treasures. So it certainly was a seemingly impossible task to try to protect everything.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Otto says, it's so interesting to think if we as individuals are faced with disaster, evacuation, wildfires, for instance, we grab important papers and irreplaceable photographs or whatever. This is like mega evacuation to save irreplaceable works.
Yeah, that does really put it in perspective. And I'll give you something else to think about too, is this is not just something that happened a long time ago. This is still happening now. So in the Ukraine war, there have been museums across Ukraine where they've been having to do this today to pack up their works of art, take them underground to bomb shelters, take them to hiding places that we don't know about right now, not yet anyway. And so, this is unfortunately history repeating itself now as these same measures have had to be taken again.
And Otto also said, oh, we also had Anthony Dewar join us on our book club in 2022. And Otto said, I remember reading the Natural History Museum in France hiding their collection in the book, All the Light We Cannot See, which we read back then.
Yes, and he's such a fantastic and talented writer. I love his books, and his short stories are great.
So I'm looking at the chat. Dr. Levy, I'd love for you to unmute yourself, Dr. Levy, and say more about the comment that you brought up about anatomic dissections.
It's just I've always had an interest in Leonardo da Vinci, and a lot of anatomic dissections were done eventually in the bottom of churches and such, where if you look at some of the early drawings of Da Vinci and other people are very accurate and very interesting, and really represented a change in the way we kind of think about the human body and what was done at that time. Prior to the Renaissance, the church frowned upon dissections, and so it was a little bit slower, wasn't the same, and so some of the Islamic texts gave much better examples of anatomy because they were allowed to actually do dissections, where most of it was done in secrecy prior to the Renaissance. So there was one of my professors, Edwin Todd, who was an expert on Da Vinci and had written a book about Da Vinci and his impact, oddly enough, on neurosurgery. And he's somebody I enjoyed talking to.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And that interest that you're talking about in representing the human body accurately, and really studying the architecture of bones and ligaments and muscles and all of that, it coincides with this interest in naturalism in art. During the Middle Ages, there wasn't really much interest in representing the human body in a very naturalistic way. They were more focused on the spiritual aspects. And so we see a lot of flat gold surfaces and these, angels and saints that seem to kind of float on the surface. And there's not very much interest in portraying, muscles and bones and flesh in a what we would consider a realistic or naturalistic way. And so when we see these artists turning toward human dissection, it also correlates with this interest in art in representing things in a more naturalistic way, which we see, from the Renaissance onward. So yeah, it's very interesting.
I love it. Thanks, Dr. Levy. He said, and
Was I right about Tatooine?
yeah.
Is that where he is?
Mhm.
Tatooine, Star Wars. Those
I was
backgrounds-
wondering about that.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. That's funny.
We're in Florence, and you're in Tatooine. That's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. This has made me want to go to Italy so badly. Just learning about all of these different things.
I think all of us. So tell us about Florence. How many more of these? And then World War II in Italy. And I think that's, and then there's more. But we'll make it quick. Yeah.
So you're showing us the incredibly beautiful Duomo, the Cathedral of Florence, with its famously designed egg-shaped dome by Brunelleschi. And just imagine, on the eve of this epic battle between German forces and the Allies, just imagine how worried people must have been, sitting in this beautiful city that was the cradle of the Renaissance. People didn't know what the outcome of the war was going to be. They didn't know if Florence was going to fall victim to, an air raid or something like that. There were air raids across northern Italy from the beginning of the war. There were Allied bombs dropped on Milan and Turin, Bologna. The northern cities were more industrialized. They were more economically strong. This is where all the factories were. And so the Allies were hitting factories and rail yards that the Nazis might have used for munitions or for logistics. But they were also trying to weaken the will of the Italian people, who weren't terribly excited about being on the side of the Germans to begin with, but they were really trying to demoralize people so that they would quickly change sides and join the Allies. And so there were some bombs that were dropped on Florence, but they had drawn up these maps ahead of time that showed where a lot of the important historical monuments like the Duomo would have been. So at least on the Allied side, there were instructions not to drop bombs on the cathedral. The problem is that when you dropped a bomb in 1943 from way up in the sky, it wasn't 100% accurate. It wasn't super precise. And so, for example, one of the bombs that the Allies dropped was aimed toward the Campo di Marte train yards. This was a train area that the Germans were using for logistics. And they did take out the train yard, but they also took out several city blocks that were alongside it. So there were a lot of civilian casualties as well. So then on the other side, the Germans could use that as propaganda to turn people against the Allies at that point. So this was one of the things that interested me about this story, was to look at the German side and the Allied side, and then, you know, see that the Italians were there kind of in the middle of this battle between these two giant forces, and to try to understand how people would have interpreted the information that they got. You know, much like today, we have people who can look at the same set of circumstances or facts and come up with two completely different stories from those same set of circumstances or facts. And certainly that was the case in Italy. There were lots of different perspectives about what was happening, and people were getting lots of mixed information from the German side and from the Allied side, and then from their own press about what events were unfolding. And I think it must have been a time of great distress and trepidation, not knowing what the outcome of the war would be. It was a brutal, slow battle up the peninsula of Italy. And I think at times it was really unclear who the victor was going to be, and what the outcome was going to be for the Italian people.
Awesome. We have so many people in the chat. Okay, so first, Lauren said, I loved how you made the connection throughout Eva's narrative between photography and the truth.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, as an art historian, this is something we think about a lot when we look at photography. And I remember, you know, being an art history student, just starting out in college and studying photography, the history of photography, and realizing that, you know, a photograph is not necessarily always the truth, right? I mean, we know that now in the age of social media, but, you know, even in 1943, they could have created a photograph that would tell a certain story from a certain angle. And certainly that was the job of a documentary photographer then. So yeah, I think photography is very interesting in that way.
Lisa also asked, I'm 75 pages from finishing, so I don't know if it was mentioned, but how many of the works of art were permanently lost or destroyed?
So I'll try not to spoil the ending for for those who haven't gotten that far yet, but there were some 300 works of art specifically from these Florentine art collections that were looted by German troops during this time. They were taken from one of the hiding places in the countryside called Montagnana. And at the end of World War II, of those nearly 300 works of art, 10 were still missing. As of today, 9 of them have been recovered, and there is one still missing. So in the large scheme of things, I think that's pretty amazing that everything else came back to Florence. There was some damage, but you know, again, amazingly, most of the things remained unscathed. But certainly we have to sort of zoom out a bit too, and realize that across Europe during World War II, there were millions of works of art that were displaced in some way by the war, either looted or hidden or packed up and put into storage for safekeeping. And, you know, certainly there are a lot of things that are still missing and haven't been found. And there are certainly a lot of things that have been restituted over the course of the last, you know, 8 decades. And it's still going on now. I mean, in the world of museum collections and private collectors, there's a lot of discussion and research and debate about restitution. So it's a big topic in the art world. And, you know, if you have a work of art come to market for sale, today people are very concerned about provenance, that is the history of the object, where it's been, and documenting all of that, because there have been some cases where it's, you know, been discovered that something was looted or stolen from somewhere, or, you know, taken in some illicit way, and that needs to go back to its rightful owner. So it's still an area that's very much alive in the art world right now. But specifically for these Florentine collections, To my knowledge, we're still missing one thing from this particular set of circumstances that I write about in the last masterpiece.
And William, I'm sorry, I missed your comment from earlier. He said, I think all humankind brings something to offer. An important thing to paint. It's an important thing to paint the whole picture in your writing. Today, we can learn to see everyone in their naturalistic state and appreciate them different or not. Love it. He's our little they're all our philosopher, the typers.
It gets very philosophical. That's for sure.
Otto also asked, did the military get kicks for spending money on resources to save art, focusing everything?
I'm sorry, I might need to repeat that. There was a little bit of an audio glitch there.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. Did the US get Danielle? Can you? Might be from
Oh, let's see. He said, Otto said, I think it's magical that we are in physically different locations, different generations, and different modes of communications with a common thread of love of literature.
And
Yeah,
then
that's awesome. Are you hearing my voice twice? You're hearing like an echo?
Yes. I'm starting to hear it now. Oh, I think it might be Danielle's audio. Sorry,
I just muted myself. I think, Laura, when you were talking, it was picking up mine and then repeating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's all of the intricacies of Zoom.
Yeah, so I saw there was a question there about whether the U.S. military had criticism for spending resources on art versus human lives. And, the value of art versus the value of a human life is always a big question in wartime, right? It's a big moral question. But no, actually, the U.S. founded the Roberts Commission, and which later became the Monuments Men and Women, and these were artists, art historians, people who worked in the art world who were brought in to help in this effort of preserving monuments and works of art and then restituting them at the end of the war. So the US government was very much in favor of spending resources to save these works of art. So it wasn't a question of, criticism at all.
We also have a comment from Jack. He said, I like how Gerhard, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, became a war hero, saving people as well as art.
Yeah, and Gerhard is modeled on a group of, this is a true story, a group of miners at Altötting. Altötting is a very remote place in the Alps in Austria. And there was a salt mine there that had been used since the Middle Ages to extract salt from the earth. And they used it to hide some 6,500 works of art, including things that were precious to the German and Austrian people, and at the beginning of the war were placed in the mine for safekeeping. And then later it also became a repository for hiding looted works of art, including the Ghent altarpiece, several works by Michelangelo, musical scores by Bach and Beethoven, all kinds of precious items. And toward the end of the war, Hitler gave the order to have the mine exploded, and there were actually explosives placed in the mine. And some of the Austrian miners themselves hatched a plan to detonate the explosives so they would not go off. So this was an act of resistance that was hatched by these local miners, and I thought Gerhard might play a role in that cool story.
I was like, yes, go Gerhard. I love it. Next, in the slides, it says, tell us about studying art history at Yale.
Oh, I feel so fortunate that I was able to do that. It was such an awesome experience. And, I got to study with some professors who were quite elderly by the time that I got there in, let's see, it would have been about 1993. And so these were professors who had been there, probably since World War II or shortly thereafter. So I feel really fortunate that I was able to study with them, because some of the, of course, they were important scholars who had published widely in art history, but they were also such incredible teachers and lecturers. I mean, people would just be on the edge of their seats at some of these lectures. I had a professor of ancient Greek sculpture, Jerome Pollitt, and he would attract 300 students in a course on Hellenistic sculpture, just probably one of the most esoteric subjects in art history. But he was such a talented lecturer that it was great. So I feel very fortunate that I got to study there with these, just this old guard of art history who were so talented as lecturers and teachers, as well as scholars, and also to be able to make connections with people in my own generation who I'm still in touch with. And so yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to do that.
It's amazing. Otto mentioned, he says, I think this is the most diverse group we've ever had, and I would love everyone to type in the chat where they are and how they found us. So Laura, I know are you joining us from Washington, D.C.? Is that where you are?
North Carolina today.
Okay. That's wonderful. So yeah, we would love everybody to type in the chat. Of course, we have some San Diego people. Dr. Levy said from stalking Otto, which is wonderful.
He's in Tatooine.
Yeah, in Tatooine. Danielle's is in LA. Lisa's in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's amazing. San Marcos. Oh, Coronado. That's awesome, Jack. Desiree says San Diego Otto's teacher for 2+ years. And Bella's from Long Beach. I'm an Otto Nation groupie. A lot of these people are from Otto's Nation. He is the reigning king of inclusion. Zach said Los Angeles. Orange County. In San Diego, but feeling Florence. Love it. And then Donna, thanks for coming, Donna. She says, thanks for having me. My name is Donna, and I heard of this amazing book club from the Neuroscience Conference this past November. Laura, we host an annual Global Neurodiversity Conference, and Otto and his typers have been a part of this conference for the past 3 years, and Dr. Levy has moderated it, and they do an incredible job. And then Dana's our executive director, and she's joining us from North Carolina. She's at Duke Law Parents Weekend, and we're doing mock classes at the school right now. We love this book club. Otto and Daniel started us.
Sorry, I got kicked out again. Did I miss something?
We're having people share.
Okay.
Yeah. And I love this book club. It's so diverse and inspiring. I was just telling Laura how you, Danielle, and Otto started the book club during the pandemic, and it's just grown into this amazing, group gathering for people all across the nation, and have been a part of the Neuroscience Conference. And you share your experience, Danielle.
It's really cool getting to meet all the authors. So that was a very interesting development for sure.
I visit a lot of book clubs, and every one is different. I'm always curious to know how they're organized and how people choose books and everything. And yours seems like it is really unique and really vibrant. So congratulations for building such a really cool community of people who love books.
It's nice, just because for me, I gravitate towards, I would say, more English majory books. So reading more modern literature has been good for me. So a lot of the books I read are very old. So I think when we first started the book club, I was picking things like Dostoevsky or I guess Catcher in the Rye is more recent, but so it's been good reading authors that you can actually talk to and learn from and who are modern, and so that's been a really nice experience for me.
Otto says she likes dead authors.
Exactly. I didn't want to say that, but Chaucer.
Yeah, the very first book that we read was Reign of Gold, and it was like 500 pages. So this book club started as a very intellectual, philosophical project.
Challenging.
Now it's amazing having Janelle Brown and Angie Kim, other authors as well, who have joined us at our conference even last year, presenting with Otto and the Mod Squad, and talking about literature and the intersection between verbal fluency and intelligence. So amazing. But I want to open it up to other people to say anything they want to Laura at this point. Please ask away. You can unmute yourself as well. First question from Otto, Miss Morelli, any sneak peek on your next work?
Oh, thank you for asking. I just am in the process of doing final revisions on my book that will be out probably in November of 2024. And it's called The Keeper of Lost Art. And so I'll have more to share about it. I've just seen the cover of the book. Haven't been able to share it yet, but I'm really excited to share that with people. And so that's what's coming this year. And then I'm starting on the book after that, and we'll see where that one leads us.
Well, we'll definitely be following you. Otto says, can't wait. Love it. Any other last minute questions from anyone?
I just wanted to say, I think we all very much appreciate just the incredible amount of work that goes into, given that what you're presenting is fiction, but there's so much work on the actual history and the actual people and the actual art and what is real, and then creating a story based upon all of these real things, but taking a fictional path to do a better job of really describing how important all of this is.
Thank you. Yes, that's my favorite thing, is really trying to weave together fiction and nonfiction, and it's a really fun exercise. It is a ton of work, you're right about that, but a labor of love for sure.
And I just wanted to point out, Laura, how much I've enjoyed also your virtual experience of actually seeing artists in Italy perform their art. I just finished the mask making one, and I just love Italy, but I can't travel there right now. So it's just so nice to take that in. And I know when I went, I appreciated so much all that effort that goes into the artisan's work that's over so many generations. And you just offer so many things for us to enhance our experience of Italy, but also appreciate art history at such a different level. And so I thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. I do offer some art history courses. If you want to check those out, you can just look at my website, lauramorelli.com. I have a Tuesday newsletter that goes out. It's free, and you can sign up also on my website to get that. And I send out information about books and Italy and art history. And I invite my subscribers to special online experiences like the mask making workshop that you did. And so if you're interested in that, sign up at lauramorelli.com. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Desiree also mentioned, I just started the book, but I already love the story, especially the imagery and how you use all 5 senses to paint a scene. William says, you bring amazing life to words. Thank you. And Bella also said, Laura, I love your positive energy. I haven't finished your book, but I'm invested in your story. And Otto said, I'm totally fanboying right now. Thank you for joining us today. It's been thrilling.
Oh, it's been great fun for me too. You've got a really special book club. It sounds like it's just a wonderful, vibrant place. So congratulations on organizing it.
Thank you. I'd love to take a group picture before we leave. And is it okay if we post this on social media, Laura? And
yes, and I'll hold up the book too. So you
yeah,
can see it.
perfect. I love it. If you'd like to share your camera, now would be the time. I'll do a screenshot. So just look at your cameras and smile. Ready? 3, 2, 1, cheese. Love it. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. It was great fun. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.